Manager shocked to discover one encouraging response. Janitor's daughter speaks perfect Arabic in a medical office. Emily's hands moved mechanically as she brewed another cup of coffee, the rich aroma filling the air of the bustling cafe. Outside, the vibrant chaos of New York City hummed with life, but inside, her world was defined by steam and espresso machines. Glancing at her watch, she knew her shift was nearly over. In a few hours, she'd swap her apron for textbooks, diving into anatomy lectures that felt as heavy as her aspirations to become a doctor. Yet every time she thought about the future, a knot of unease formed in her stomach. Her father, Ahmed, worked late shifts cleaning the very offices where she had her clinical rotations. He sacrificed so much, escaping the wreckage of Syria, holding tight to the hope of a better life for Emily. With each sweep of his mop in sterile hallways, she felt the weight of that hope and expectation that thrummed beneath her skin. The pride he once held as a physician in his homeland contrasted sharply with the menial position he occupied now. Could she honor his past while forging her own path? One mundane afternoon morphed into something far from ordinary. As she wrapped up her shift, she caught snippets of a conversation between a patient and her father. The patient, a worried mother, could hardly navigate the ins and outs of the healthcare system, and Emily instinctively stepped in, slipping into her native Arabic. The exchange flowed. She offered compassion, patience, and knowledge. Then, she noticed a woman in a crisp suit standing nearby the regional healthcare manager, an unexpected witness to this small act of connection. The surprised look on the manager's face sent a jolt through Emily. The implications tangled in her chest. If this woman recognized the value of her bilingual skills, would it mean opportunity? Or was it just another fleeting moment of recognition that would dissolve once the manager left her father's office? The urge to impress Ward with the fear of being viewed as merely a janitor's daughter, an idea that still wrapped around her like a vice, squeezing her thoughts. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Days turned into weeks, and a storm brewed inside Emily. When the manager invited her to a meeting to discuss staff roles, hope and anxiety clashed within her. The slightly cracked facade of her confidence faded as soon as she entered the conference room. As she sat there, surrounded by colleagues who all seemed more polished, the doubt seeped in. Would she be dismissed as just another barista chasing a dream? Would the stubborn misconception that her background barred her from meaningful roles become her reality? The discussion escalated. Emily's heart raced. With her father's legacy on the line, she took a deep breath. She confronted the panel about her struggles, the dismissive comments, the underestimation of her abilities. Her voice quivered, carrying the weight of her heritage and future. She fought to reclaim her place, articulating her qualifications and how she might enrich the healthcare narrative with her unique perspective. As she spoke, the room fell silent, and every racing thought begged for a flicker of acknowledgement. But doubt lingered in the air. Just as the manager's expression began to shift, the door swung open, shattering the moment. Emily's breath caught in her throat as uncertainty returned, leaving her heart pounding in her chest. Would she remain a forgotten voice? Or would this moment spark a change? The tension hung thick and she felt lightheaded under the pressure. The thought of abandonment loomed again, anchoring her in a struggle between who she was and who she aspired to become. Emily sat motionless as the door swung open, heart hammering against her ribs. The interruption shattered the fragile sense of progress she had just begun to build. A lanky man in a lab coat hurried through, oblivious to the tension in the room. All eyes diverted away from her, and for a brief moment, she felt invisible once more, just a shadow in a corporate space where her identity as a janitor's daughter loomed larger than her aspirations. With each passing second, self-doubt gnawed at her. She could have easily faded into a quiet corner, just as she often did when overwhelmed by the reality of her surroundings. But a flicker of determination sparked deep within her core, igniting a stubborn drive to confront the fear that had kept her complacent for too long. The man in the lab coat took his seat, and her thoughts twisted around the notion of stepping back into her truth, the knowledge that she was capable, passionate, deserving. As the manager resumed the meeting, Emily held her breath, recalling the urgency of her previous words. Not only the urgency but the importance behind them, the more than just the desire to be recognized but the need for validation. She recalled the simultaneous pride and sorrow in her father's eyes when he spoke about his past life in Syria, and it struck her how much she depended on that pride to shape her future. Rounding her shoulders back, she made a choice. Emily cleared her throat, feeling the weight of her father's dreams resting on her tongue. "I know I was just a coffee barista and I've only recently begun my clinical rotations," she announced, her voice steady, each syllable deliberate, "but my experiences, both personal and professional, are what can truly shape the healthcare environment around us. I am bilingual. I can connect with communities that others cannot. I want to build bridges, not just between patients and their care but inclusive spaces within healthcare." The room fell into silence again, but this time, it felt different. A palpable shift in the air. Emily sensed the manager's gaze on her, scrutinizing, weighing. Discussions always seemed to revolve around qualifications measured in years of experience, Ivy League backgrounds. Yet here she was, a testament to resilience, her trajectory unequaled by the others sitting around the table. Fueled by adrenaline, she pressed on. "Since working alongside my father, I've witnessed the struggles firsthand. People like us often find themselves lost in the system. I might not have the typical qualifications yet, but I want to change that," she articulated, her conviction rippling through her words. "We need more individuals who understand what it means to be on the margins, and I can be that voice." The moment hung in the air, her vulnerability exposed. She awaited the response, each heartbeat amplifying the silence. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. Finally, the manager shifted in her seat, an intrigued expression breaking across her face. But before Emily could decipher it fully, the door creaked open again, and in walked a visibly annoyed colleague, shattering the atmosphere once more. Frustration knotted in Emily's gut. She had fought hard to reclaim her narrative, but the universe seemed determined to test her resolve. As questions swirled in her mind, would she be heard? Would she ever break free from the shadows of her father's past? She felt an undeniable urge to press forward. This couldn't be how her story ended. Just then, an idea sparked in her mind, one unbelievably bold and inviting. What if she organized an outreach program targeting her community? One that aimed to illuminate the language and cultural barriers in healthcare. The possibilities surged with life as hope enveloped her heart. But could she convince others to see her vision? The time had come. She needed to take the next step. Determined, Emily vowed to change her narrative. The moment of truth was approaching. Would her initiative make a difference? Through her ambitions coursed an exhilarating thrill, but the underlying anxiety still lurked. Emily left the meeting with conflicting emotions swirling within her. The adrenaline that had buoyed her earlier now fizzled into a dull anxiety, unfurling in her chest like a question mark. She had stepped forward, daring to present her vision, yet doubt nagged at her. Was it enough? The faces of her colleagues flitted through her mind. Some appeared astonished, others dismissive, but most infuriatingly, there was the unmistakable air of skepticism. She pushed against the crowded hallway of the hospital, a river of white coats and badges flowing around her. Every hurried stride felt like an obstacle race, the cacophony of medical discussions and medical jargon pressing down on her like a weight that threatened to flatten her bold ambitions. It would be too easy to retreat, to embrace the comfort of obscurity, but she couldn't allow that anymore. This was her moment to carve her own identity beyond her father's history, beyond her past jobs. Stepping outside into the brisk afternoon air, Emily gazed up at the overcast sky, flecked with patches of sunlight struggling to break through. They were inescapable metaphors for the battles she faced. Persistent hope contrasted with looming uncertainty. She needed to focus. Momentum could slip away if she didn't act swiftly. She pulled out her phone and jotted down notes for what would be her outreach program. The initial idea seemed almost juvenile. Cultural healthcare awareness had a nice ring to it. But would anyone take it seriously? Professional programs were often filled with posters of accomplished individuals. She felt starkly aware of her inexperience. How could someone like her execute an initiative of such magnitude? A flash of doubt crossed her mind, but she pushed it aside. Her first target was to speak directly to her manager. If she could articulate the need and point out the benefits of her proposal, perhaps, just perhaps, she could instigate change from the inside. It would take more than mere ambition. She would need a plan, strategies that spoke to the hearts of her colleagues. But could she gather the courage to present it again, especially after the meeting's reception? Setting it up in her mind, she thought of the past conversations with her father. His persistence in the face of hurdles was emblematic of his own journey. He never allowed his limitations to define him while battling unending systems of bureaucracy. Emily realized then that she needed to channel that same fire, not just for herself, but also for those who were often overlooked. She started drafting ideas for how to engage others in her mission, wanting to stress the importance of cultural sensitivity in healthcare practices. Could she host workshops? Involve local community leaders? Engage her peers to participate? Each thought fueled her resolve, as she paced back and forth, embodying the determination that had brought her to this point. Emily envisioned herself as that barrier breaker she aspired to be. But then the questions expanded beyond logistics. They morphed into fears of rejection. What if her colleagues dismissed her ideas as naive? Especially now that the shift in the dynamics of their professional environment was at stake. What would it take to foster true collaboration among already established experts? Days turned into weeks, and as her initiative took form, Emily sought allies among sympathetic colleagues. Individuals she sensed could be supportive. She wanted them to know that her voice wasn't just noise. It reflected unspoken experiences. And yet, beneath the hustle of aspiration, she remained acutely aware of looming expectations, of facing those who believed she didn't belong at the table. What she needed now was a catalyst, an event that could sway others into believing in her vision. Just when she felt the familiar flutter of fear winding through her, she stumbled across a potential opportunity. A committee meeting was scheduled to discuss potential initiatives to improve community health outreach efforts. It was the chance she needed, a platform to advocate for her ideas. What lay ahead could either solidify or shatter her aspirations. Would she find the courage to seize this opportunity, or would she cower from judgment once more? Emily paused on the threshold of her next steps, steeling herself for what was to come. The time had come to face not just her doubts, but the very real challenge of convincing others to believe in her vision. Would they see her as capable, or would she again be dismissed as just the janitor's daughter? The answer hung in the air, electric and charged with possibility. Emily stood outside the conference room, heart hammering against her ribs. The weight of her voice felt amplified in the silence surrounding her. As colleagues filtered in, she noticed their confident strides, their easy camaraderie. The familiar knot of insecurity twisted tighter in her stomach when she thought of them. Experienced professionals accustomed to achieving results to combat the pervasive fear, she sought to ground herself in purpose. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her that every step toward change was a step worth fighting for, a mantra that ignited her resolve. This was not merely a proposal. It was her chance to carve out a space for those voices that often went unheard. With each tick of the clock, the moments until her presentation dwindled and a wave of determination surged through her. Emily had practiced meticulously. Each point outlined in crisp clarity echoed the mission she had crafted piece by piece over the past weeks. She was ready to anchor her ideas in the palpable needs of the community, to transform abstract concepts into actionable strategies. The room filled steadily until Emily found herself surrounded by her peers, all expectations and skepticism visible in their expressions. She swallowed hard and breathed deep, focusing on both her vision and the necessity of it. Her gaze settled on the chair where her manager sat, eyebrows slightly raised in anticipation. "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I'm excited to present an initiative that speaks to an often overlooked gap in our healthcare services: cultural sensitivity and awareness." As she progressed through her proposal, she noticed the skeptical faces beginning to soften. Each slide resonated with a lived experience she had gathered from conversations and anecdotes over the weeks. Drawing from her background, She spoke passionately about the importance of understanding cultural nuances in patient interactions, the value of tailored communication, and the potential for better overall patient care. Halfway through, Emily addressed the group. Imagine a workshop where healthcare professionals can engage with community leaders. Picture conversations that challenge assumptions and break barriers. Together, we can advocate for care that acknowledges diverse backgrounds. A shift took place. Colleagues leaned forward. Some whispered among themselves an unspoken acknowledgement that perhaps there was substance in her words. The room breathed a little easier as she shared stories of previous patients whose cultural backgrounds had complicated their healthcare experiences, illustrating the urgency of her call to action. Yet doubt still lingered, an incessant whisper that wondered if her words were enough to combat the years of established practice that surrounded her. She noted the expressions of condescension from a few senior doctors, but the weight of their judgment felt lighter now. With each passing moment, Emily grew into her role as an advocate. Pushing through her insecurities as she concluded, she invited questions. The first few were technical inquiries about logistics, shelling out assumptions that belied underlying skepticism. But as she navigated their challenges with poise, she sensed a transformation. One member, an established physician, nodded thoughtfully and challenged her to expand her ideas, suggesting potential partnerships she had not even considered. The conversation shifted gears. It was no longer strictly an interrogation, but a collaborative brainstorming session. Emily's heart soared with each encouraging remark, and she felt a visceral sense of connection to her vision and the initiative. For the first time, this room felt like a space she belonged in. Her voice, though faint at times, was gaining resonance. Just as the tension seemed to ease, the door creaked open, and the committee chair stepped in, casting a shadow over the proceedings. The room fell silent. All eyes locked onto the unexpected interruption. Emily braced herself, aware that her fears could morph back to their original form at any moment. What now? She wondered, her breath hitching as the very real uncertainty threatened the progress she had made. Would they embrace her ideas? Or would the door to opportunity swing shut just as quickly as it had opened? As the chair cleared his throat, Emily steeled herself, ready to confront whatever judgment awaited her. Emily hadn't anticipated the weight of silence that enveloped the room as the committee chair prepared to speak. It felt as if all eyes demanded an immediate resolution, one that could tip the delicate balance of her burgeoning momentum. Her heart raced, the previous buoyancy of confidence dissolving into a visceral knot of apprehension once more. "Thank you for your presentation, Emily," the chair began, his voice filling the air with a mix of authority and curiosity. "We appreciate your work on this initiative, but I noticed you mentioned partnerships with community leaders. Could you clarify who you have in mind?" The question hung like fog in the air, and Emily needed a moment to collect her thoughts. Did he truly want a thorough breakdown, or was this a means to undermine her commitment? Her earlier confidence danced dangerously close to the edge of doubt. She glanced at the clock, suddenly aware of its relentless ticking. There was no time for hesitation. "Of course," she replied, her voice steadier now as if recalling the strength of her initial resolve. "I've spoken with several local organizations that focus on immigrant healthcare initiatives. Collaborations with them could allow us to tailor our services to better fit specific cultural needs. For instance, engaging with the Arabic Health Alliance could provide invaluable insights and access to Arabic-speaking professionals who understand those unique challenges." His brow furrowed slightly, a subtle indication that her response seemed to register. But before Emily could elaborate, another committee member interjected, skepticism coloring her tone. "But how do we know their methods are compatible? We've established protocols for a reason." The words cut deep, but Emily forced herself to focus through the discomfort. It was crucial to acknowledge the fear of change that gripped many in the room. She had to bridge the gap, not just offer solutions but actively dismantle the barriers they viewed as impenetrable. "I understand the importance of maintaining quality," she began, "but innovation often requires transitioning from traditional approaches. Engaging directly with the communities we wish to serve allows us to discover what works for them. It's about expanding our understanding of care." Emily's gaze swept across the room, seeking connections in frayed expressions. She sensed that her vision was beginning to resonate, even with its critics. Gradually, whispers filled the space, their collective curiosity edging into the atmosphere. Just when the conversation began to feel revitalized, the committee chair raised his hand to call for silence once more. "We want to hear more about what you've planned in terms of implementation," he said, yet in his voice lurked a challenge that spurred her inner warrior. "Absolutely," she affirmed, adrenaline coursing through her. "I propose a pilot program that starts with targeted workshops. The first steps would focus on training existing staff to recognize cultural nuances and offering language resources." She paused, profiling the room's tension, daring the committee to envision her ideas in action. "What if we structured a series of role-play scenarios?" Emily continued, her words gaining speed now. "By providing opportunities to experience cultural encounters, we put our healthcare professionals in the shoes of our patients. This can demystify preconceived notions and build empathy." As she spoke, her mind raced with the details. She envisioned colorful workshops, dynamic interactions that would breathe life into the sterile walls of convention. Yet even as she painted this vivid picture, the walls of her own insecurity beckoned to rise again. The chair, appearing thoughtful, turned back to Emily. "That sounds promising, but who will take on leadership in these initiatives? It's essential that someone experienced oversees these workshops to ensure accountability." "Absolutely," Emily acknowledged, her voice laced with resolve. She contemplated the implications of the question. Leadership demanded confidence and authority. "I would be honored to take the lead, perhaps collaborating with a selected few respected figures from our mutual organizations. I believe this partnership could enhance credibility and also highlight the reflective growth that is crucial for all of us." The murmurs in the room shifted again. She sensed a new energy swirling, a melding of lines previously drawn in the sands of skepticism. And this stirred something deep within her, igniting ambition and courage, no longer merely fighting to be heard but advocating for a collective evolution. "Interesting," the chair remarked, driving a probing look toward her. "You seem quite passionate about this. But it has to be noted, establishing trust with these communities will not be easy, especially when some people may prejudge the motivations behind our outreach." "Then let us listen rather than assume," Emily confidently replied, igniting the very conviction that had fueled her presentation. "If we fail to engage genuinely and recognize our own biases, we risk building a foundation that cannot endure." With each response, Emily transformed her fears into understanding, weaving an intricate tapestry of purpose from the threads of doubt. But just as the warmth of acceptance began to envelop her, a quiet voice punctured the atmosphere, a voice that echoed from the back of the room, piercing through the growing camaraderie. It was one of the senior doctors who had expressed condescension before. "This all sounds very idealistic," he said, skepticism lacing his tone. "How do we know this isn't just another fleeting idea?" At his words, Emily felt the precarious balance shift once again. Her heart sank slightly, but determination flared within. She realized she was facing more than just one antagonistic opinion. It was the culmination of systemic resistance difficult to unearth. Steeling herself, she prepared to respond with raw sincerity. Would this be the moment where everything she had fought for hung in the balance? Or was it the time for realization that her growth depended not merely on external validation but on the clarity of her own vision? As she began to speak, the weight of purpose ignited her passion, unraveling the pathways of doubt that still resided deep within. The air crackled with expectation. She knew the stakes had just risen. Emily took a deep breath, aware that she was now standing on a precipice. Each word she spoke would either solidify her vision or send her tumbling back into the depths of doubt. "I understand your concerns," she said, her voice steady and authoritative, "but we must challenge ourselves to look beyond mere numbers or established procedures. Trust is not built on paper. It is cultivated in relationships. We need to be present in these communities, to listen actively and engage with their stories." Silence enveloped the room. Emily locked eyes briefly with some committee members, sensing the tension swirling like a storm, fear of change clashing with a hint of curiosity. The doubts expressed by her colleague lingered, but she could feel the precarious balance shifting. This was a tipping point, I realize that embracing new methodologies can seem daunting. She continued, heated conviction matching her pulse. But let us consider the alternative. By not doing anything, we perpetuate a cycle of misunderstanding, which ultimately harms the very people we aim to support. What is idealistic about caring for individuals in a way that recognizes their humanity? It was a gamble, standing toe-to-toe with skepticism, yet for the first time, Emily felt the stirrings of something else. Courage. The chair nodded slowly, and Emily sensed the flicker of a spark gaining momentum within the room. Furthermore, she pressed on, eyes alight. Outreach needs to be reciprocal. We cannot dictate terms to those we intend to serve without understanding their needs first. We can empower these communities by inviting them to participate in shaping the solutions rather than imposing our preconceptions. A murmuring of agreement rose from the gathering, and Emily's heart soared. She was finally starting to lead them to an intersection of beliefs. Her conviction wasn't just finding its voice, it was manifesting in her demeanor, clarity, and unyielding focus on the mission at hand. Let us talk about relatable examples, she suggested, employing a strategy she had recently learned about curating persuasive narratives. Imagine a setting where local community leaders, such as those from the Arabic Health Alliance, inform our staff about culturally sensitive practices in healthcare. This wouldn't be about changing protocols at once. It's a gradual integration. By elevating their voices, we build not only trust but also loyalty. Artificial limitation was dissolving. The committee's initial resistance softened by the richness of her rhetoric. The skeptic from the back shifted uncomfortably, as if her words had pricked his steadfast armor. My background in linguistics has allowed me to witness power dynamics that inherently exist in healthcare, Emily declared, drawing on her academic training. I've seen the contradictions in how we communicate with patients, and if I can help our department translate medically complex concepts into relatable terms that resonate culturally, then we'll foster cooperation. In that moment, she recognized her own experience, her knowledge tools for advocacy that could break down barriers and forge connections. No longer were they just credentials on paper, they were gateways to transformation. Yet just as she felt the adrenaline coursing through her veins, another voice, more assertive this time, cut through the ambient noise. Great ideas are frivolous without a sound plan. What about the budget? Who funds these workshops? How do you measure success? It was the senior doctor again, his skepticism unyielding. Emily felt the burden of his inquiries crashing down on her. Yet, somewhere within her, a glimmer of hope emerged. A well-structured plan would require precise framing. Could she recalibrate her thoughts into a robust proposal? Those are excellent questions, she said, deliberately calm despite the tempest inside. Our first step is assessing the current budget. I will collaborate with financial advisors to ensure that our pilot program aligns with resources. As for measuring success, I propose using qualitative feedback from our healthcare professionals in tandem with metrics on engagement and patient satisfaction rates. Confidence surged within her, energizing her resolve. Emily was ready not just to present a roadmap of possibilities but also to tackle the legitimacy of her vision with analytical precision. The atmosphere in the room shifted again, the once crescending notes of doubt beginning to harmonize with the voices of endorsement. She could feel it. The tide was turning, but she had to keep pressing forward. She couldn't let it slip away. Yet, she added, driven by impulse to cement the length of her argument, we also have to acknowledge that a pilot program is a living entity. We need to remain flexible and responsive, especially as we encounter unforeseen challenges. It's not merely about permission. It's about engaging in continuous dialogue to grow and adapt. Just then, as her argument wrapped itself around the room like a blanket of newfound potential, a realization hit her hard. For all the obstacles she faced, this moment was nothing short of a crucible refining her not just as a professional, but as a leader ready to pivot the framework of healthcare dialogues. Before the chair could respond, a soft-spoken voice from the back slid into the space, bringing a breath of life into Emily's convictions. A janitor's daughter, she understood, spoke fluent Arabic, and her father had a wealth of stories about the community. What if that connection could serve as the bridge to not only partnership but genuine understanding? Emily's heart raced anew as she pondered the possibilities. This wasn't merely about policy anymore. It was about humanity at its core. The shadows of self-doubt that lingered in her mind began to dissipate. She sensed the moment had arrived for confrontation to stand within the realm of her aspirations and not merely defend them. What she had always possessed was clarity, determination, and, above all, the realization that truth must be spoken, illuminating unseen paths forward. Would she seize this opportunity to redefine her professional identity and leap into her destiny? The air hummed with unspoken potential as the committee leaned in, and she stood ready to advance her case, contemplating the enormity of change that hovered just out of reach. The tension in the room hung like a taut wire, straining against the gravity of Emily's aspirations. She felt the eyes of the committee assessing not just her words, but her very essence, her commitment, her integrity, and her vision for a future redefined through engagement with the communities she sought to serve. This was more than a proposal. It was the embodiment of her identity. As the janitor's daughter spoke, her clear and articulate voice cut through the lingering doubts. Emily leaned in, absorbing every syllable. The young woman shared her father's encounters, detailing moments when mere language translation became a barrier to true understanding. Emily couldn't help but wonder how stories like these could enrich their dialogue, their protocols, and, ultimately, their outcomes. The committee's attention shifted. For so long, Emily's thoughts had been trapped within a bubble of theoretical application. Now, she was being reminded that the heart of the work existed beyond policies and budgets. It lived in the stories of people who felt unheard. When the young woman finished, Emily felt a surge of inspiration build within her. "Thank you for sharing that," she said, her voice laced with sincerity. "This is exactly what I mean. We need voices like yours to move us forward. By weaving our methodologies around these lived experiences, we create an inclusive framework that genuinely meets people where they are." The senior doctor continued to glare, but Emily could sense a crack forming in his facade. Perhaps the emotional resonance had finally pierced the shell of skepticism. Yet doubt still flickered within her like a light that threatened to extinguish. This moment, this brief connection, was a fragile treasure she was determined to protect. "Let us not forget," Emily continued, leaning into the momentum she had gained. "This is about building relationships. What good is our expertise if we cannot communicate in a way that resonates? We need to use these stories not just to inform our practices but to reshape our understanding at all levels. I want the patients to walk in and feel seen not merely as numbers on a report, but as whole human beings." The committee members exchanged glances. It felt like a subtle shift in the atmosphere, a new alignment of energies, as if they were recalibrating toward a shared goal. Emily's mind raced as she prepared her next steps. She envisioned a series of workshops, where narratives would be the centerpiece and healthcare staff would be trained with both the wisdom of community stories and the intricate dynamics of cultural sensitivity. But the shadows of uncertainty still danced around her resolve. Could she really pull this off? She felt the burden of responsibility weighing heavily, recognizing the stakes involved. These were not mere ideas on paper. They had the potential to redefine lives. What if they failed? Pushing past the chill of doubt, she reframed her thoughts. Failure was not a finality. It was a concept laden with possibilities. Each setback would be an opportunity to learn, to adjust, and to grow. What if success was not linear, but rather a series of iterations guided by the feedback she had solicited? "Let's consider," she pitched, her voice dropping to draw the committee in closer, "a pilot program where we invite community members, including remarkable individuals like you, to share their insights directly. With your input, we can shape our approaches and assess their effectiveness collectively." The room stilled as Emily gauged the reactions. She could see flickers of thought, ideas brewing beneath the surfaces of doubt. Encouragement blossomed, yet she had to cultivate that momentum into actionable plans that wouldn't crumble under scrutiny. Suddenly, a realization gripped her tightly. The committee wasn't just a collection of hesitations. They were guardians of established structures that had been honed over years. Emily needed their collaboration, their buy-in. She had to forge not just an alliance, but a partnership rooted in shared vision, a transformation that could only flourish through collaboration, for herself and her colleagues too. Just then, the senior doctor shattered the precarious quiet. "You want our team to invest energy and resources into this?" His voice was challenging. "Are you prepared to back it up with data? The realities of funding? The commitment beyond the initial wave of enthusiasm?" Emily felt a rising tide of anxiety, but she refused to be swept away. "Absolutely." Her response was immediate, fueled by resolve. "I will draft a comprehensive proposal addressing all of your concerns. I will analyze our current budget and identify ROI. I will design methods for measuring impact because I believe in this path forward." The confrontation felt inevitable, and she knew this was her turning point. The stakes were higher than she had ever imagined, but the potential for transformation was now burning brightly. Would she embrace this challenge, face the committee's demands, and pursue a path that could redefine her career, her purpose? As the committee folded in on itself, Emily looked around, each member a reflection of her own evolving journey, mirroring her uncertainties and aspirations mingled into a growing coalition. They were at a precipice together, their fates hanging in the balance, each distinct yet intertwining in purpose. The moment lingered, charged with anticipation. Could she weave their hesitations into a shared narrative that would propel them all? The time had come to face not only the skeptics but the reality of her own vision, one that rested uncomfortably close to the embers of her personal evolution. Would she ignite those flames into a fire capable of burning through the obstacles ahead? Emily took a deep breath, her heart pounding in a steady rhythm that matched the pulse of resolve. The senior doctor's challenge echoed in her ears, a sharp contrast to the gentle hum of growing hope she had felt moments before. She needed to construct her vision not as a dream blown by the winds of ambition, but as a fortified reality, anchored firmly to the concerns of the very committee that had once seemed impenetrable. The prospect of drafting a comprehensive proposal weighed heavily on her mind. Questions swirled like a tempest. How could she possibly outline the intricacies of a plan that held the power to redefine interactions between healthcare providers and the very communities they served? Each detail felt monumental: budget analyses, data collection methods, impact metrics. It was one thing to discuss ideas in a meeting filled with enthusiasm, quite another to translate those ideas into a concrete framework that could withstand scrutiny in a cold, hard analysis. But therein lay her defining challenge. Emily had to harness the energy of the committee's initial receptiveness and use it as a catalyst for deeper inquiry. Their skepticism could bend if she could offer them something tangible. She envisioned a two-pronged approach. First, gathering stories from patients, providing qualitative data that showcased the gaps in care. Second, a robust structure that quantified the value these narratives could add. The timeline for her proposal was tight. She could feel the hours ticking down, relentless, each tick a reminder of the looming obligation before her. A voice stirred within, reminding her that time constraints could be exploited as an impetus for clarity and decisiveness. Could this pressure become her ally instead of her adversary? She had to shift her perspective. These next few days weren't merely about crunching numbers. They were an opportunity to delve into her own strengths as she passed her colleagues in the bustling hallways. Emily seized a moment to connect with her peers. Their insights could furnish her proposal with a richness that numbers alone would lack. She approached Laura, a fellow analyst known for her expertise in community health metrics. "Can we brainstorm?" she asked, her voice even, suppressing the tremor of urgency she felt. "I want to develop a robust framework for impactful storytelling." Laura's dive into the conversation was immediate, her insight sharp and efficient. They exchanged ideas, combing through metrics that associated qualitative data with improved health outcomes. Emily felt the electric current of collaboration pump through her as thoughts expanded, dissecting assumptions and weaving new possibilities. With every idea they pinned down, she felt the pieces of her vision aligning, melding into something cohesive. After hours of intellectual sparring, Emily returned home to review her notes. The flickering glow of her desk lamp cast soft shadows around the cluttered pages. She paused, reading through her hastily scrawled thoughts, mulling over the implications. The committee's skepticism was valid. The healthcare system was grounded in tried and true protocols, deeply rooted in skepticism toward new methods that lacked evidence. But what if, Beneath the veneer of uncertainty lay an opportunity to revolutionize understanding and practice. Steeling herself against the mental fatigue, Emily commenced drafting the proposal, her words turning into a conduit for the very change she envisioned. Determination surged anew, coursing through her veins as she articulated each point, frame by frame, aligning stories of real people with quantifiable goals. As the sky outside darkened, Emily's fingers danced over her keyboard. She projected her voice, the echo of the janitor's daughter whispering encouragement in her mind. What if the narratives become a tripod, supporting a healthier dialogue? They weren't merely stories. They were guiding philosophies that could lead to understanding. The sudden sound of a notification broke her concentration. A new message flashed on her screen. It was from the committee's chair, requesting a follow-up meeting. Anxiety clawed at her, but a surge of excitement washed over as well. Here was a chance to present her progress, to test the waters, to face the skeptics head-on, armed with depth and rigor. The moment felt pivotal. Time blurred as she prepared her materials for the meeting. The anticipation of facing the committee danced alongside her fears. This was it. She was on the verge of a brush with destiny that could either pave the way for her budding career or leave her doubting herself once again. As she sat back, her heart racing, Emily resolved to seize this turning point. With newfound clarity, she whispered to the darkness around her, "Let us show them why we must embrace the voices of the unheard." The stakes were higher, and the path was treacherous, but she had ignited a spark fueled by the hopes of those she now served. Could she withstand the scrutiny that awaited? Would her resolve be enough to withstand the flames of doubt? This was merely the beginning of tumultuous trials ahead. What awaited her at that next committee meeting could very well define the trajectory of her ambitions. The morning of the committee meeting arrived, casting a pall of uncertainty over Emily. The air felt thick, tightening around her like a vice. She had spent the night rephrasing every argument, memorizing statistics, and visualizing the committee's faces as she spoke. Yet, as she stood outside the conference room with a stack of meticulously organized notes tucked under her arm, doubt crept in like an unwelcome shadow. What if her proposal fell flat? What if the stories she had woven together didn't resonate? Would she be able to pull together the evidence necessary to demonstrate the effectiveness of qualitative data? Breathing deeply, she inhaled the lingering aroma of coffee that hung in the corridor. This could be the moment that transformed her career. Yet the weight of the potential outcome threatened to crush her spirit as she stepped into the room. Her heart beat erratically. The table was filled with the very individuals whose approval she sought. The grizzled chairperson, the statistics-driven analyst, and the seasoned doctor who had first posed the challenge. Each face wore a mask of skepticism, and Emily's pulse quickened. She could already sense the walls closing in. Flashes of inadequacy flared in her thoughts, her inner critic's voice echoing her insecurities. But she had prepared for this. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steady, though she felt tremors in her hands. She laid out her notes in front of her, the sleek paper whispering against each other as she arranged them with a practiced precision. "I'm here to present my proposal for improving patient-provider communication." As she spoke, images of her patients' faces ignited in her mind, the pain in their eyes when they felt ignored or unheard. Their stories resonated deeply within her, fueling her conviction. Slowly, she relaxed into the rhythm of her presentation, allowing the narrative of her vision to unfold. She offered compelling anecdotes from the patients she had interviewed, illustrating the human aspect behind the data. She could see brows furrowing as she conveyed the significance of these stories, the fear, the hope, and ultimately, the trust they sought for their healthcare experiences. Every statistic is more than just a number. It's a narrative, a life, she asserted, summoning every ounce of courage. Her passion poured forth, and she felt a shift around the table. However, as she transitioned into the quantitative analysis, Emily noted skeptical glances exchanged among committee members. The chairperson raised an eyebrow, signaling for her to pivot. "But, Emily, how do we measure the impact of these narratives? We deal in accountability and numbers. What empirical data can you provide to demonstrate that this approach will yield tangible results?" The question hit her like a cold wave. Her previous confidence began to sputter. She had anticipated questions around methodology, but the perceived challenge felt more like an indictment of her entire framework. I believe the qualitative data can be synthesized into measurable outcomes, but I recognize the need for empirical backing. A tremor edged into her voice, the uncertainty framing her previous clarity. The silence that followed was palpable, yet it jolted something within her. The realization that she had to merge both qualitative and quantitative aspects struck her. She couldn't drown here. This was a moment to summon her adaptability. "Let me illustrate," she said, pivoting her approach with newfound resolve. "In my research, I've identified specific metrics correlated with improved outcomes in patient satisfaction and retention. If we collect these stories systematically and aggregate that data, we can generate a set of insightful metrics that validate our approach." She watched as her words landed. They hesitated, mid-thought, captivated as if peeling back layers of doubt. Emily's heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration as she grasped the unfolding potential before her. Could she truly bridge this gap? The room erupted in questions as the committee began to engage, probing her on the practicality of her suggestions. What had begun as a confrontation with skepticism transformed into a conversation, an ebb and flow of ideas that offered a flicker of hope. Just as her momentum peaked, the session dragged to a close, and the chairperson leaned back, crossing his arms. "We appreciate your insights, Emily, but we need time to digest this. Change is not easily embraced, and you've got some tough questions to answer moving forward." Emily sensed the weight of the challenge. This was merely the start of a collision between innovative thought and established protocol. Yet, the fear of failure darkening her vision was replaced by a flicker of determination. She knew she needed to tap into her network once more, solidify data, and return smarter than before. As she strode out of the room, invigorated despite the uncertainty, her path ahead seemed murky yet promising. The threads of her ambition tangled beautifully with the skepticism she faced. "Now it's time to dig deeper," she murmured, an unshakable resolve taking root. But hidden beneath this momentum was a critical question. How far was she willing to push herself to implement change, especially when the resistance began to intensify? Emily sat at her desk, surrounded by a constellation of notes and data sheets that reflected her recent foray into the world of healthcare innovation. The initial shock of her committee meeting still echoed in her mind, along with the weight of the skepticism that had charged the atmosphere. Yet beneath the lingering doubt, a familiar flame of determination was reigniting. She was not merely the janitor's daughter. She was now a voice for transformation, leveraging her unique perspective to bridge the gaps in patient care. In the weeks that followed, Emily dove deep into research, seeking out compelling quantitative evidence that could validate her narrative-driven proposal. She painstakingly cataloged patient stories, compiling qualitative accounts into a structured format that would resonate with the analytical mindset of her colleagues. Each story became a data point, each voice transformed into a pivotal metric. She blended the narrative with numbers, infusing life into statistics, and showed how personal experiences could inform their clinical practices. Through those countless hours of preparation, Emily also approached her manager, seeking mentorship to fortify her emerging leadership skills. Their discussions ignited fresh ideas. As she presented drafts of her proposals for the outreach program, her manager offered insights into effective persuasion techniques and the art of engaging stakeholders. Underneath the surface of her initial doubts, Emily began to demonstrate the very capabilities she had long feared she did not possess. One afternoon, months after that pivotal committee meeting, she found herself back in that conference room. But this time the atmosphere felt transformed. Supportive faces surrounded her, a community of allies rather than skeptics. Her proposal had gained traction. Her dedication to fostering cultural sensitivity in healthcare was being recognized as crucial rather than idealistic. Members of the committee now included their own anecdotes and insights, contributing to a growing dialogue that felt dynamic and collaborative. Standing at the front of the room, she spoke with the confidence that had once felt elusive. "Today, we present not just an initiative, but a movement that reshapes how we engage with our communities and our patients," she began, feeling the pulse of a shared vision reverberate through the space. We must recognize that cultural fluency is not ancillary to our mission. It is fundamental. The feedback was fervent, supportive questions and ideas flowed freely, and contributions from diverse perspectives sparked a sense of ownership among those present. As the committee discussed and evolved her outline plan, Emily felt the pride swell within. She was initiating a real change, not just for herself but for a kaleidoscope of voices craving acknowledgement. Let us implement a pilot workshop, she suggested, bolstered by the enthusiasm that permeated the air. By integrating cultural awareness into our training, we can create healthcare paradigms that resonate with the people we serve. When the committee chair signaled their consensus, a collective cheer broke through. They were no longer just colleagues. They were an emerging collective, poised to pioneer a conversation that had been long overdue. As the meeting wrapped, Emily stepped outside, an effervescent sense of fulfillment washing over her. The cool breeze of late afternoon beckoned. It felt refreshing, a tangible sign of her own transformation. She not only embraced a career path, she depositioned herself as a leader, someone capable of redefining norms and advocating for those whose voices often went unheard. Emily returned home that day, her heart light with purpose. There, she found her father in their small living room, a cacophony of evening news mingling with the aroma of spices from the kitchen. She shared her news, the excitement in her voice as palpable as the warmth of their shared stories. His pride radiated through their small space. The dreams he carried across continents had found new life in her. With every success on her new path, she gained confidence, the shadows of her past fading into lights of possibility. No longer just the janitor's daughter, she had demonstrated that resilience and perspective were her true currencies. As Emily continued to develop her outreach program, she understood that her journey was not just about professional recognition. It was about developing authentic connections within the healthcare system. She had transformed her challenges into opportunities, bridging her narrative with data, and redefining her identity in the process. In her reflections, she understood the journey ahead would demand vigilance. Each milestone a reminder that continuous growth is necessary to nurture the seeds of change. She had conquered fears, embraced her identity, and emerged with a renewed purpose. Emily realized she needed to share her journey with others. People like her, who felt underestimated, deserved to know their voices mattered. This is a journey, she thought, as fresh resolve settled in her heart. And I am ready. Now it was time to move the world. Would you join her in making this change? Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share.